being blind and having some success in business and sales and leadership. But if I can succeed with the challenges that I have and they can then do the same in their own, then to me that's legacy, and that's the impact I want to leave. First of all, coaching shouldn't cost you anything. If it's, especially on the business side, if you're a year, 2 years into working with a coach and it's still costing you money, or you're not seeing a bigger return on investment than what you're investing in that coach, then that's a problem.
So 12 years ago, we both show up at this little honky-dory networking event called BNI, and you just blew my mind. I remember that, in that we all had to go around and we had to do our little presentation, and it got to you and you stood up and you just owned the room. Tell me a little bit about how you found BNI and what that meant to you.
Yeah, so thank you for saying that. But I'd say I got into business in 2011 in the insurance industry. I had no sales experience, no business background whatsoever. But before that, I had been working in a call center. It's pretty much the one thing I did in life that I absolutely hated work-wise. And so I wanted the complete opposite of that. And so that's what made me look for something where I'd have more freedom and be able to build something on my own, which I didn't have any idea what that looked like. But I found the supplemental insurance industry, which was definitely the polar opposite of that, where I was, cold calling and I was not in a cubicle all day, which I loved, but I also had no idea how to build a business. So I figured I need to find some people who can help me with this, and started looking for different resources and trying to figure out how to network. And I didn't know anything about that either, but I stumbled on BNI, and you were actually the first one-to-one I ever did, sitting down with you and having
I didn't know that.
Coffee. Yeah, because you were somebody who actually came up to me right away and was like, hey, I know you have a story. I want to get to know your story.
Yeah.
So, which I thought was really cool. So,
but you do have one hell of a story, and that's the coolest part, because one of the most magnificent things is I've watched you do things, with your disability. I don't even like to call it that because I don't even see it as that, but that's how most people would see it. The fact that you can't see, people would say, oh, you can't accomplish the same thing somebody that can see can. And when I saw you, that was exactly what it did. And that's why I said there's a story here. Mm-hmm. And I have watched you do things that most people would say are impossible. And that's what's made you the coach you are today. But how did you overcome that? Or did you just never even let it bother you at all?
No, I think it bothered me at a time, for a time, especially when I was younger, probably in middle school and high school, when it's really important for young human beings to fit in. I was like everybody else. I wanted to fit in, and obviously I didn't. So at that point, I think it bothered me a lot. And once I got into the insurance industry, I think in the beginning, I looked at it as a liability. But then I just realized...
Wait, you looked at what?
My blindness?
Your blindness is liability?
I think early on I did, at the very beginning.
How did other people look at it, though? Did you ever talk to anyone about that in the industry? They hired you on, so they saw something in you, so they didn't see it as a liability.
No, I don't. I think they were willing to give me a shot, which is what I really appreciated. But I think there was others in the industry who were kind of quietly wondering if this was something that could work, when 8 or 9 out of 10 people were not succeeding in the industry, in an outside sales, straight commission world. I think they were like, hey, what shot does this guy have? And I probably had that thought early on too, but I just decided I wasn't going to allow myself to fail. I was just going to do whatever I had to do and find what the top producers were doing and get mentorship wherever I needed to be successful. But I kind of flipped that script after a while. I eventually hired a business coach, which was kind of a turning point in my career.
How many years into your career did you hire a business coach?
2 years.
So a lot of people,
I should have.
Yeah, a lot of people think with a business coach that they got to wait until they're successful, until they got all this money, and I think that's when it's too late. You got to get a business coach early on, and that's what you did. I would agree with you. You did it a bit late.
Yeah, I agree, and I wouldn't have struggled nearly as much as I had in the first 2 years, but I realized after that first 24 months or so, hey, that I need some secret sauce somewhere. I don't know what I'm missing. And
what was the secret sauce that the mentor brought you? Because I think a lot of people, they hear about coaches and mentors and they don't really know what it means. So what for you at that time, way back then when you're early on in the insurance career? You know, you got everybody betting against you, or most people betting against you, and you hire this business coach. What was the biggest secret sauce you got out of that?
So two things. The first one is mindset. Like I mentioned, I had some of that, looking at my quote unquote disability as a liability and flipping that on its head and deciding that this was something that was actually an asset, changing that, completely shifting that mindset is something that coach helped me do. His name was Steve, and Steve taught me, you know, he's like, I have a question for you. It was one of the first calls. His question was, when you walk in, do people treat you differently or the same as everyone else? I'm like, well, they treat me differently because I walk in with a dog. so right
Who is
away,
here today?
Yeah, right.
Taking a nap. Hey, it's not nap time, buddy.
Indy down. You know, Indy is someone who is my third dog, but my first dog, Rupert, who I had when I was in the industry.
Oh, I remember Rupert.
Yellow Lab. Yeah, you do.
Miss him.
Me too. And Elvis, my second dog. They've all made it clear when I walk in that, you know, something's different. And he said, do you think that's a positive or negative? And I said, I don't know. I kind of feel like there's a neon sign on my forehead that says blind salesman approaching. I walked in with a suit and tie and a guide dog. And he said, but do you think people stop and are curious and have more of a conversation with you than they do with other agents? And I knew that was the case because after he mentioned it, I thought back and I had shadowed other agents, and they kind of got kicked out of everywhere we went into. But when I was the one doing the talking, they would have a conversation with me.
Even though I had a story, that's what they wanted.
Yeah. Even though they would reject me sometimes, I still got no just as many times as other sales agents. I at least had an opportunity to have that conversation. And so once Steve helped me flip that script, flip that narrative in my head, I started to notice these opportunities. I think a lot of times for anybody listening, I think the biggest thing is you may have opportunities in front of you all the time. And I know, Chris, you talk about this a lot, but if you're not paying attention, if you're not aware, if you don't have your antennas up, you miss those opportunities. And that was the case for me. And with that, him saying that to me really made me stop and start to notice the interactions I was having and being more aware and intentional about it. And that changed things. And the second thing I would say is just teaching me to pay more attention to what my prospects' pain points were and learning to speak prospect rather than worrying about what I wanted or what I needed out of the meeting, and paying attention and focusing on the other person. And once I did that, everything changed. When I started asking more questions, when I started guiding the conversation, but doing it based on what they needed, those two things together were where the magic started to happen for me.
So I was on a plane yesterday flying to Cincinnati, and the pilot and I were just talking, and he's talking about this guy, and he's like, you know, you ever meet one of those guys that just always gets lucky? And I kind of just looked at him, and I'm like, you know, Jim, I don't believe in luck. And he kind of looks over at me, and he's like, what? I said, no, I don't believe in luck. I think the only thing luck is the thing that happens when you chase opportunity. And I said, luck just follows opportunity. If you're always out there seeking opportunities, you're always going to get lucky. And people just think it's this magical thing. Oh, that person just gets lucky. No, that person's focused on opportunities and you're not.
100%.
That's kind of exactly what you just said. So that was your first coach. Mm-hmm. And how much would you say he changed the trajectory of your career?
So out of about 615 agents, in the operation I was in, the sales operation, the state operation, I was in the bottom 500s for the first 2 years in terms of new business brought in. 14 months after I hired that coach, my third full year, I was number one in new accounts.
Wait. So, let's just repeat that again. So give me those stats before and after again.
So I don't remember the exact numbers, but bottom 500, somewhere between 550 and 600. I was a little bit better in year two than I was in year one, out of about 610, 615 agents that were licensed in the state operation. And then I went from that to number one in my third full year. And that coach was the one thing that I had changed. Now, there were things I changed because of that. So I did a lot of different things, but the biggest turning point for me 100% was hiring Steve.
So in your third year, you were number one?
In new account and new business sales. There were existing business sales from veterans who were doing business.
Yeah, but that's
20 years.
Kind of residual.
But in terms of new business, I was number one.
I don't think people understand how difficult the insurance and financial business is and the success rate. And I just want to talk about this real quick. In that business, Even back then, the success rate of a new agent was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 90%, because it's single-handedly like one of the hardest businesses to get started in, because they just, nobody does well being told no.
No.
In an average week, how many appointments would you do?
That I would run?
Yeah, like how many appointments would you do in an average week when you were
About 5, 3 to 5.
So you do 3 to 5, and out of those 3 to 5, how many of them told you no?
I mean, once I was in front of them, I would say that, I had about a 20%, 25% close rate. But before you get to those 3 to 5 appointments, almost everyone told you no. I mean, you'd get 9 out of 10 people who would tell you no when you called them on the phone or walked in and introduced yourself.
Did you ever feel like quitting when you kept hearing no and no and no?
Of course.
Why didn't you?
It's a loaded question. I think a big part of it is I'm very stubborn, and a lot of people told me early on I wouldn't be able to succeed, including some people I really like. People who are close to me are like, this is a bad idea. And so for that reason, I'm kind of like a snapping turtle. I just kind of dug my heels in and said, I'm going to make this work one way or the other. So I think that's the biggest motivator I had, but I didn't want to go back to working in a cubicle, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I hated it, what I was doing before. For people who like it and love it, that's great. But for me, I hated being micromanaged all day long. I hated having my bathroom breaks timed. I hated coming in at 8 o'clock and having my first, collections call had to be at 8:01, and my last one at 4:59, and they were all monitored, and you get pulled in the office if you don't make enough calls or whatever. So I hated that. And so I kept that in front of me every single day, even when I wanted to quit and I felt like this isn't for me. And there were lots of days like that, but there was never one that was a time where I thought back and think, this makes me want to go back to what I was doing before. And so keeping that pain in front of me was greater than the pain of what I was experiencing, and that made me keep pushing on.
How many business coaches and mentors have you had? So that was your first one. That was your third year in the insurance business.
Well, if we're throwing mentors in, I don't know, a dozen probably.
Okay.
I mean, coaches that I've hired, 6 now, 5 or 6.
Okay. Do you have a coach today?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how, as you've evolved and done different things, you outgrow a coach. Every coach has a specific task or specific skill set that they can take you to. Yeah. But then a good coach also knows that when you've reached that point, it's time for you to move on. Like when you went from one coach to the next, how was that transition? Was it awkward? Did you kind of have to be like, I don't know how to tell them because I'm just not getting anything out of it? Or was it pretty natural for you?
I think it depends on the situation, of course, but I'd say it was, for the most part, natural. I just, one of them coach that I had, moved to a different role. They were doing it, individual coaching, and then they got hired by a large corporation to do it within in-house. So that case, it wasn't me who made that change. But to your point, with multiple coaches, it's been, that season was over, and I had the information that I came to get from that person, and it was beneficial to both of us. And, just letting them know that, hey, I'm going to be stepping into a new chapter in my business or in my life, and I'm going to need different coaching, or I'm going to take a step back, whatever that case was, from that one thing that we were working on. But like when I got into leadership, I needed someone who could help me with that. I didn't need as much help on the sales side of things anymore, but I needed someone to teach me how to be a leader. So I needed a different coach for that. When I started my own coaching business, I needed someone who had coached entrepreneurs and sales professionals and people in leadership positions for years, and trained hundreds of people to do it successfully, so that I could do that and take that knowledge and apply it, and then take that and pass it on to other people, and add my own special success story and season to that seasoning to help that person who I'm across from or on the phone or on Zoom with get to that next level. So I think it really is just to anybody looking for a coach, I would say it's just finding someone who is where you want to be, or who has helped other people get to where you want to be, and asking that person for that advice, whether that's a mentor in your business, as you've had in your businesses, obviously many times, as have I, or if it's someone you're actually paying money to.
Yeah, I think it's important, because we're going to get into the next chapter of your life where you've gone from student to now you're the teacher. Now you are the business coach, and it's a fun evolution. And I've done similar things where like I've evolved into different roles. I always like to think of it like a caterpillar morphing into a butterfly, right? It's just, you morph and you evolve. And sometimes that evolution is challenging, and you feel like you're starting over and you feel like you're failing. Gosh, I feel like I'm always starting something new and failing at the exact same time, but that you overcome that. And I think coaches have helped me get there, but I have definitely outgrown coaches and gotten to the point where I needed to say goodbye. And it was always really hard for me because I always felt like I was leaving a friend. I always felt like I was letting them down, and really it was just, I got to a point where everything they could have given me to get me where I wanted to be was already fulfilled, and I was ready to move on. And, sometimes I went from one coach direct to another one, and other times there was a 6 month to a year time frame where I was like reevaluating my surroundings to figure out, okay, what is it that I need help with now? And that person, that teacher, always appeared at just the right time. Now, let me pause a little bit from this journey, and I want to talk just about some personal experiences because we've done some just awesome stuff. We met in that BNI chapter, and I remember I just saw something in you, and I'm like, there's a story here. So we did that first one-on-one. And then after that, just the friendship evolved, and it's been a long one. But one of the cool things was you started speaking, because today you're an author, you're a speaker, and you're a very well-known coach. But I remember when you were just starting to speak, because we both started speaking at almost the exact same time. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
Like in BNI, like I sucked. I'd get sweaty palms when I had to stand up. Did you ever get that way?
Sure. Early on.
Yeah. Like, and you stood up and like you're talking, but you're I don't know, your mouth gets super dry and you almost can't even talk. And you're just like, oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yep.
So like I started speaking and then you started speaking. And I remember I'd have you come out and speak at groups because I always loved the story. Mm-hmm. What was that transition like? Because like, doing the insurance business, that to me, when I knew you were successful, I was like, wow, that's pretty incredible. But then to become a speaker, a well-known speaker, and I believe you've actually been paid to speak at events.
Yeah.
What was that evolution like? Because a lot of people, like they'd rather die than get on a stage and speak.
Yeah, I've always liked being in front of the room in a way, but I did definitely go through a period early on where even though I enjoyed the thrill of that, of being able to share something that would impact someone in the audience, I definitely had those jitters and feel like my palms are sweating and like you get tongue tied and don't know what to say in front of the group. Even though you're prepared, you forget what you're prepared to say. But I think the insurance industry prepared me in a big way for my speaking business because I was presenting in front of groups. I did a lot of group presentations in the insurance industry, hundreds and hundreds of them over the 15 years I've been in the insurance industry. So you get in front of small groups and then larger groups. And at some point, it just, as long as you know what you're going to say and what your presentation is and how you're going to engage the audience, it stops scaring you or having that same effect. I still get excited when I'm in front of a group and I'm going to deliver a message. I still pray that, God's going to work through me in some way to touch someone who needs to hear what I'm going to say. I still get, if I'm at some point, it doesn't excite me anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. So I love that I still get those butterflies, but for me now they're positive. It's not, like I want the floor to swallow me up.
One of the most memorable trips we ever did is we were going out to Secret Knock, and that was in Beverly Hills, if I'm not mistaken, is where it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, that or San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego or Beverly Hills, California nonetheless.
Go back and forth between the places.
Yeah, and I remember I told people that you were going with me, and they're like, oh, make sure this, make sure that, make sure you're watching over him. Don't ever let him out of your sight. I'm like, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. I'm going to let him lead me. He's just fine. Everybody was just like so concerned, and I was the only one that was like, I'm not worried about anything. But then I did get worried about something because we were walking down the street, and who was it, Rupert?
Yes.
Yeah, Rupert had to go potty.
Yeah, I was just going to.
And I'm like, well, all right, is there a litter box around? I'm a cat guy. Clearly, I wore my cat shirt today. And you're like, no, we got to find a dog park. I'm like, dog park?
What's that?
You want to tell the story of how that went? Because I don't know if I was mortified or out of my comfort zone. I'm just used to cats going in a litter box, and with dogs, yeah, a little different example.
That was the best because you're usually. It really was because you're usually very. Assertive and in control and confident of the situation, but that was probably the most out of your element I've ever I've ever experienced you being, because you're like, wait, what? We got to go to a dog park. Where do they have a dog park around here? How do we find one? Is there a map to find
I was so worried.
You're like, are there going to be other dogs there? So, there was one not that far away, and I think we asked for directions, and someone said, oh, it's right down this block. And we went there, and you're like, so what do you do? Like, do you clean it up? Is there, what do you do? Is it? And I'm like, yeah, you got to take a bag and clean it up. And you're like, and you do this every time? I'm like, yeah. And you're like, how do you find it? I'm like, I put it over your hand, and you get down and you mark with your foot. If you're blind, in my case, other people just look for it, but I mark with my foot about where the dog, went to the bathroom, and then I get down and pick it. And you were just, I think, partially mortified and partially fascinated.
More mortified, a little bit fascinated, yeah. Your real estate business lives and dies by the network and the connections that you make. I mean, after all, your network, well, it's your net worth. That's what you've always heard, right? If that's an area where you desire improvement, well, Private Money Club, it's for you. PMC saves you precious time and money by bringing the real estate world, well, right to you, right in the palm of your hand. So get in on the action, like so many others have, by going to privatemoneyclub.com and sign up. Because to me, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, how do you find it without stepping in it?
Yep.
And you had a system. But I think a lot of the things I've watched you do were system-based.
Yep.
You've developed systems in everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you bought your house, when you were doing work on your house, everything is a system and a process. And I think that puts you light years ahead of people, because you've been forced, because you were, you just don't have what most people do, which is vision. Yeah. So you were forced to create skill sets that most people never develop in their lifetime. So back to being a liability. Some would look at that as a liability. It is 100% an asset. Mm-hmm. And you've used that asset incredibly well. Right down to that point of explaining to me how you found poop in a dog park. And I was, yes, mortified. Absolutely mortified.
I think I've had to, I think one of the biggest things that separates me as a coach from others probably, and one of the advantages I have, is exactly what you just said, which is I've had to problem solve all my life on what most people would see as just a daily activity. How do I brush my teeth without being able to see the toothpaste tube and put it on the toothbrush? And how do I pour a drink without spilling it and knowing it's not up to the top? And how do I time my shoes without seeing it? Like all kinds of different things that people don't think of, that I've always had to be creative and find solutions to problems on the fly. And obviously I had help with some resources early on, but you get really creative on, okay, how am I going to do this? Which key, if I have a new key that I put on my key ring, is that key. Like, okay, take a piece of tape and put it around that key because it's the new key, until you get used to or you count how many keys are on the ring and where is it on the ring. Like, those are problems that most people just like, oh, I look for the silver key and that's it. I look for the one that's shaped like this and that's it. Now, some of that I can feel, obviously, but just simple things like that have trained my brain to always be looking for solutions to everyday problems. And so when someone comes to me who's a coaching member and says, hey, I've got this problem in my business, what are we going to do about this? Then it usually does not take me long to have I know it's going to sound funny coming from me, but taking a bird's eye view of the situation and saying, okay, here's where we are, here's where we're looking to get to. What can we do to come up with a solution to get you from here to there? And I think that's possible because of my everyday problem solving. That, to me, I don't really think a lot about it. I'm just like, here's where we are, here's where we need to get to. What do we have to do to get from here to here?
I love that analogy. So now, you've transitioned, you've morphed, if you will, from the insurance business, which you're still involved in. And that's the beauty about, isn't the insurance business an amazing business? Yeah. People listening are like, oh my God, that's the most boring thing. But it is the greatest business on earth. Because even though you're focused on something completely different, correct me if I'm wrong, but you still get a renewal check 100%. Every single month. And you will for a period, even if you stopped doing everything, at least 10 years, if I'm not mistaken, 7 to 10 years?
As long as, with the company I've been with, the main company I've been with for 15 years, it's once you're 10 years vested, it's as long as the business is on the books.
Wow. Yeah. So just it could mailbox money.
Yeah, it could be 10, 15, 20, 25 years.
But you've taken everything you learned there and all the time you were there. Now you're a coach. So talk to me. Being a coach is one thing. You can be a great coach, but you could have 0 clients. Yep. But you've gotten really good at marketing. Mm-hmm. You wrote a book or how many books have you written now?
One.
Okay, you got the
Still
books, you
working
got your
on two
first
more.
book, yep, 2 more in the works. I knew you were going to say that without even asking. And you've used all these things to catapult your coaching business, which I know is incredibly successful. And I don't know that because you said it, because you're always too modest, but your wife is like, oh yeah, that means yes, you're crushing it. So how did you go into this, and how did you decide you wanted to be a coach? How did you find clients, retain clients, and build that business?
Yes, it's a great question. So the first, when I first, I think, realized that this is something I might want to do at some point was when coaching had the impact it had on me, right? Because there was such a turning point in my career. And my first coach had such an impact. I was like, I want to do that someday. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what platform I'll use, but I want to be able to help somebody get from confusion and chaos to success, and have them say, hey, because I told him many times, he played a huge role in my success. And if it hadn't been for him, I probably would not. I would have stuck around a long time because I'm stubborn, but I probably would not have had anywhere close to the success I had in the industry. And so that was the first thing that made me want to be involved or to want to be a coach in some capacity. Then I became a district sales manager. That I was in that role for 10 years. So when I was promoted, I started coaching and training agents, and that was my favorite part of the business. Like there's always, in any type of management with any company, there's always politics involved and meetings involved and, all the stuff that you have to do in order to do the stuff you love to do. But the coaching is what kept me, the mentorship is what kept me in that role for as long as it did, when a lot of people are in that role for 1, 2, 3 years and they're like, I'm out of here. And I'm going back to, to just working in the field. But I loved the mentorship and just the teaching and coaching aspect of it, and having someone else's success story, being a piece of that, even if it was a small piece, having them come to me and be like, hey, I just ran this appointment without anybody for the first time. This is the question they asked. Here's the answer I had. And I closed the deal.
Let me pause you on that.
Mm-hmm.
That is so vital. And I just have to reflect, because I want the audience to understand what you just said. So you've had a lot of successes. You've closed a lot of deals, and you felt a sense of accomplishment, success,
Yep.
and made money doing all of this. But then all of a sudden, you're now in this role where you're coaching new agents, and they're coming to you with their success stories. And you just described it, and make sure I'm correct in saying this. The feeling you got by hearing them succeed was a heightened experience, was a better experience than you actually succeeding yourself.
Yeah, by like 10x. For me, that was like the ultimate high in terms of business, was being a part of someone else's testimonial in some way, and having them say that to me, like that was way more rewarding than closing a deal. I love closing a deal. I love negotiating and moving someone from that same place of, hey, I don't have a solution to this, to helping them have a solution as a prospect and moving them to a client. But I get way more of a thrill out of someone else, because if I do it once and I'm closing a deal, I help the client one time. But if I help somebody be able to do that for themselves, and I coach them how to be a successful agent or a successful business professional or entrepreneur, that's something they can use over and over and over and over again. And that could change their whole life.
Yeah, it changed a lot of people's lives. I got to admit, like I feel like I lived a lot of selfish years. When I was a pro snowboarder, that's all I cared about was winning, right? Mm-hmm. Every day I'd go out and I'd compete and I'd film, and all it was is just me winning. And I had that heightened sense of, accomplishment. When my career ended because of an injury, I then got offered a coaching position, to which very first thing I did is I turned it down. And when I hung up with the gentleman, I said, I'm not a coach, I'm a rider. Mm-hmm. But it slowly developed in my mind that the pro days were never going to come back. So I needed something. And I'm like, all right, well, they're going to pay me to actually be on their hill. I'll go out and I'll just take their money and I'll just do whatever. Mm-hmm. But then I felt what you just explained. I started coaching these kids. And these kids, when they would win, they would come up and they would go on the podium and they would thank me as their coach. And that feeling I got there was, you said 10x, I believe. Yeah. I'd say it was 100x. Yeah. Like I had been on that podium many times and I felt like top of the world. Yep. And then my athletes up on that podium gives me a shout out, whether they did or didn't. I'm sitting just down in a crowd of people and I felt 100x what I felt when I won. A lot of people, do you realize a lot of people never understand that? They never get that sense because they're always out for themselves. They're never, their whole lives are spent solving their problems, and they never evolve into that most glorious world where you start solving other people's problems. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. Sorry, I went down that rabbit hole, but keep going on that, because
No, but I think it's
that is
huge.
such an important piece.
I think thanks for saying that and shining a spotlight on that, because I think it's huge that Zig Ziglar was, God rest his soul, was always one of my my favorite motivational speakers and sales trainers. And one of the things he always said was, one of his most famous quotes is, "You can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want." And that's the beauty of coaching and mentorship, is you get what you want out of it, and you get, it benefits you, but you get to feel that impact and experience that of them having the success as well. So not only do you get what you want, but and are able to have a great life doing it and build the life you want, but you're also able to help other people do it and experience it. Have a front row seat for that, as you just said. Being in the crowd and looking up at the podium and it's experiencing that success that other person had. And because you've been on that podium, the feeling that they're feeling. And that you played some role in transferring that to them. You can't buy that, man.
No.
I mean, that's unlike anything else.
Last week, one of my athletes, I mean, she's obviously much older now, but she just qualified, just won a junior worlds, which qualifies her for the Olympic team. And she just got funded by the Canadian Olympic team to basically ride in the Olympics. I believe this is her second Olympics. I'm not part of that journey right now. That's above my skill level, as a coach, but I still look at her in these Instagram posts, and I'm just like, I had a small piece in this. 100%. And I know that, when I look at her on that podium, I know deep down somewhere in there, she's like, Chris helped me get there. And that is one of the single greatest things that I ever did. And if I'd never made that change, where I went from me solving my problems and me to give, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And you wouldn't either.
No way. And it's why parenting is the best, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh.
You know that. I can say that to you because you're a parent. And being a dad is, and I can't speak to the mom side, but I would imagine the same. Being a parent is the greatest, because you get to be a huge part, play a huge role. And obviously your children are going to grow up. Both of our children are going to grow up and be their own person. But you get to, you're never going to shape someone's life, or have the opportunity to, at least in the first, 7 to 10 years of life that you have with a child. And so that's been been that, like you said, 100x. That's been for me, lots of pressure, obviously, but lots of responsibility, but also tremendous opportunity to watch someone grow and know that you're having an impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, what do we have? 13 kids now, 12 cats and one little girl. Yeah. Yeah. So I had the ability to shape a lot of kitties' lives, a lot of fur lives,
in your life,
fur buddies. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about books.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people want to write a book because they want to make a bunch of money writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're smarter than that. You wrote a book for what reason?
2 reasons. One, to make an impact. I had people tell me, for years that I should write a book. You were one of them, for sure. And I resisted over and over and over and said, no, I don't want to write a book. No, I'm not ready to write a book. Now's not the time. Nobody wants to read my story. I think most people have that thought. If someone tells them, hey, you should tell your story, you should speak, you should write a book, who wants to read my story, kind of thing. And I definitely had some of that. And I felt like God kept putting that in front of me over and over and over again. Just, you should write a book. I mean, I'd talk to someone who would sit down next to me on an airplane. We'd talk for 3 minutes and they'd go, you should write a book. And eventually I just went, all right, I accepted God. I get it. I should write a book. And the one thing that really kind of changed that for me as well is I was speaking one time at an entrepreneurial event, and a lady came up to me afterwards and she said, asked me, can I give you a hug? I said, sure. And she gave me a hug and she said, I was just I've been thinking for a long time about starting my business, but I have some personal challenges, and I really have always felt like I'm going to fail, or I don't know enough to be able to do this. And she said, after hearing your story and the things you've overcome, Now I believe that if you can do it, I can do it. And so that's hence where that, and I've heard that multiple times, but that's kind of where it clicked. That's the title of my book. Now, if I can do it, you can do it. And that was what made me, looking back on that, it wasn't in that moment, but as I reflected on that, that's what kind of made me go, all right, I probably should tell this story. So impact is the biggest one. If something that I've done, and there's people who overcome way bigger challenges, greater things than I have, being blind and having some success in business and sales and leadership. But if I can succeed with the challenges that I have, if someone could take that story, read it, take some tips from the things that I've done to overcome the challenges in my life and in my businesses, and they can then do the same in their own, then to me, that's legacy, and that's the impact I want to leave. Number two, the second reason, as you kind of mentioned, I didn't get into it to get rich and sell millions of copies. I got into it for positioning, because if I felt like if I was going to start a coaching business, I needed to share my story, but also I needed to position myself as, from a marketing standpoint, as an expert in leadership and in sales and business, and as an entrepreneur and someone who could coach someone who's an entrepreneur. Because, anybody who knew me well and was in my inner circle or even had touched that inner circle knew that I could do those things. Anyone who'd watched my journey would say, yeah, I need someone I would hire, I would think, a lot of them. But nobody else knew who I was. And so if I didn't have a way to position myself in a way that would have someone look at me and say, okay, I can read this and now I know he's an authority in this area, then no one was going to hire me. And so I came to realize that, and that's that and impact are the two reasons I wrote the book. Because people, as you mentioned earlier, people get into coaching, but any business. I think people start businesses, they have a good idea, they're excited about something, but they really haven't put a ton of time into how am I going to position myself? How am I going to position my brand? How am I going to make an impact and get this message out there? How am I going to market? Most people don't know how they're going to sell or market. They just think it's just going to automatically happen. And as you know, it doesn't automatically happen. You have to be extremely intentional about it. When you do that and you have a market out there, you can get to those people. But you got to think about and be creative on how am I going to market to them and get in front of them. And so the book is one of the ways I've done that.
I always, Greg Reed, who we both know very well, always instilled this in me. He's like, don't ever write a book because of the money, because you're going to lose money on every book you ever write. But you're going to make a ton of money because of the book. And one of the things he told me, and I never forgot this, he says, instead of carrying around business cards, because I used to, in the financial business, I was always giving cards out. And, he said to me, do you know that every card you give away makes its way to the garbage can in a very short period of time? And I'm like, no, I don't even want to believe that. He's like, well, it does. He said, but if you gave your book away as your business card and you wrote your phone number and your email inside cover of that book, do you realize that nobody will ever throw the book away? They might not use that contact right away, but they'll always remember, oh, that book's on the bookshelf when they need to contact you, when that time is right. And that just hit me, man. I'm just like, that's my new business card.
100%. Yeah, my current business coach, who I think you met James Mallett.
Absolutely.
Right? From Secret Millionaire.
How many books has he written?
I think 23 now, 23, 24.
Yeah,
it's over 20, I know that. But that's exactly what he said. Same thing. That I've heard that from Greg, and he also said the same thing, that your book is it should be a very good quality business card that no one's going to throw away. And if it sits on that shelf, it might not even be the person that bought it or you gave it to that reads it. It might be someone else who takes it down and reads it. But it's why I put, as you said, your email address and things like that. I put all my information on how to work with me as a coach, how to hire me as a speaker in the beginning of the book. Most people put it at the back of the book because a lot of people don't even read the whole book. They just open it up, flip through it. And if they get to that page first, they're like, oh, I could contact this person. But most people put it in the back of the book and they never ever get to that information. So think about, I would say to anybody who writes a book or is doing marketing, think about everything you're doing to try and, utilize that to, one, help people first and foremost and make a difference. But number two, to also figure out how you're going to get that to generate business and get people to find you, the right people. So that's always the way that I've that I viewed marketing, both in the insurance industry and now as a business coach and speaker.
So I know we've been talking about books here, and a bunch of people in the audience are probably like, well, what's the book? Where do I get it? I mean, you've said the name of the book, but could you again tell them the name of the book and where they can go to get it?
Yeah, sure. So it's If I Can Do It, You Can Do It. Inspiration for eliminating excuses, overcoming challenges, and succeeding in business and life. My name, obviously, Patrick Engasser. You can find it on Amazon or at my website, patrickengasser.com.
If I can do it, you can do it. Like, I often think, like, when people, come with their sob stories of, why they can't succeed, if they're talking to you, I would always think like you would say, if I was able to do it, what the hell's your excuse?
Yep.
Right? Like, cause like, honestly, like that is it. Like you could have had every excuse in the world to just basically do nothing. And people would be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. But you didn't, and you just keep pushing. And I think that's what's so fascinating about you.
It's funny. Thank you. It's funny you say that because I always had, upper level management would always come to me in the insurance industry and say, how is it that you're able to get all your veterans to show up to meetings when nobody else can? How is it that you're able to get everybody to show up on time to a meeting? And these are all 1099. None of them, it's all straight commission. Nobody's being paid a salary to be there. And I'm like, what excuse do they have? If I took the bus or took an Uber to get there in the snow, what are they going to tell me? That the snow kept them from getting there? By 8 o'clock, I got there with a guide dog and without a car, without being able to drive. What's their excuse? So, I feel like people didn't have a reason or an excuse to be able to say, hey, this is why I wasn't successful. If that's what helps some people get across the finish line, then I'm grateful. But I think the biggest thing is, as you said, how can you help people get out of their own way, kind of overcome those excuses and get to the next level? And that's always something that I'm trying to do because someone did it for me and it changed my life. And so I want to do that for other people.
And that's what I want to wrap up with is that next level. Everybody, no matter where they're at in their life, they're trying to get to that next level. So as a coach, when people are listening to this, they're trying to sit there and articulate, how do I get to the next level? Can Patrick or can Patrick not help me get to that level? Like, how do you help people understand when you first talk to them or when they're hearing an episode like this, who can you help? Who do you feel is your best client? And like, give people that guidance. Like when people are listening to this, which of those people should be reaching out to you?
Yeah, so I would say that someone who is looking for either a sales trainer or speaker to come in and help their team or their organization get to the next level, that next level of success with a message of overcoming challenges, and that if I can do it with what I've been through, they can do it. I think sometimes people just need to hear that. I think the more beneficial training is when it's ongoing training. So an ongoing coaching program. I do a lot of that with sales organizations where it's not just a one-off. I'm sure you've had that experience where everyone's super fired up after you speak. And then a year later, it's like you come back and the top performers are still the top performers. And that's great. Those are the people who are going to implement. But sometimes it doesn't reach down to the mid-tier professionals where they're still, they need that ongoing consistency. That's an area where I feel like I've been able to help a lot with businesses and sales organizations. Entrepreneurs who are either just starting out, as you said, I hired a coach long after when I should have. I probably should have done it in the first 6 months. And usually when people say, hey, I can't afford to hire a coach or I'm not ready to hire a coach, that's usually when they need the most. That was the case for me. And I just had to simply get past that and make that leap. So someone who's starting out but is serious, not they're like, hey, I'm dabbling, I'm going to try this. If you're going to try it, it's at least from my experience, you're probably not going to get where you need to go. If you're really committed and you say, I'm committed, I'm going to make this happen one way or the other, I just don't know how yet, you're ready for a coach, probably. If you're saying, hey, I don't know how yet, I don't know how, but I know that I want it and I know why I want it, that's someone who's ready for a business or sales or leadership coach. And I would say someone who's looking to scale their business, an entrepreneur who is having success in their business. You talked about it a lot. You go through these different transitions in your business. You've gotten to a certain level. It's like, okay, now I want to 10X from here, or I want to double the size of my business in a period of time. I just don't know how I'm going to do that without trading more hours. And freedom is a huge thing that I focus on. It's really what made me stay in the insurance industry is that, I experienced what you talked about, the residual income, the renewals of ongoing business and getting paid multiple times for a single day's effort. A lot of business owners realize I got into this for freedom, and at some point they say, hey, I don't have that. Instead, I have a business that owns me. How do I change that? How do I grow my business, continue to expand while buying back some of my time, being able to invest more time with my family or the people I want to invest it with, or work more on my business, doing the things I love doing rather than in it all the time? Or sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm doing all the behind the scenes work. What I really want to be doing is getting back in the field. I don't have anybody to do the behind the scenes stuff though. And it's helping people strategize and build tiers of leadership within an organization to really be able to free up their time to do what they do best, right? Focusing on their unique ability, focusing on the 20% that's going to bring them the 80% of results. We've all heard of the 80-20 rule, but far too often we don't use it. That's one of the things that I've helped people implement within their businesses a lot. And I would say anybody who's looking to design a different life than the one that they have through a business or starting a business to make that happen. That and leadership training are all the things that I would say are areas I can help.
I love it. And we're going to finish with this. I know in my life, when I was at my hardest points, when I was down at the bottom, when I was literally thinking I had hit rock bottom, those are the points where I needed help. I needed a coach. But every time when I was at those levels, money was my crutch.
Yep.
When someone would say, well, you need to get help, I can't afford it. How do you answer that when someone says, oh, I'd love to work with you. I really know you could help me, but I don't have any money?
Yeah, it was my crutch too. I mean, that's why I didn't.
That's why I brought it up. I think it's probably everybody's crutch.
That's why the biggest thing is, first of all, coaching shouldn't cost you anything. Especially on the business side, it may if it's in another area of life, but if it's sales or business like it was for me, short term, the first month you might not see payoff, but long term, if you're a year, 2 years into working with a coach and it's still costing you money, where you're not seeing a bigger return on investment than what you're investing in that coach, then that's a problem. So, I mean, I always tell people this, and I try to show people the math behind it on a regular basis as to how this is going to equate to you ending up ahead working with me. But beyond that, I think it's looking at how long will it take you to get the information you could get from a coach, whether it's me or somebody else who may be a better fit, whoever that is for you. Because I want you to have the coach that's the right fit for you. But if you don't hire that coach, if you don't work with that mentor, how much is it going to cost you long term? How long will it take you to get that information? Because let's be honest, you working with a coach, you're a really smart guy. You're one of the hardest working people I know. You would have figured it out, man. But the difference is your coach, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing your coaches help you get there faster.
That's it.
Because that's what it is for me. It's not that I wouldn't have figured it out. It's just that it would have taken me a lot longer, and it would have cost me a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of stress. If you want to save time, energy, money, and stress, that's what I do. That's what a good coach, whoever it is, does, is they're going to help you get there faster with less effort. Doesn't mean you're not going to put in effort. You're going to work your butt off, but they're going to help you. It's the closest thing I've ever found to a shortcut. At least it was for me. There's no way I would have went from the 500s to number one in a year without someone giving me the tools that I didn't have. It would have taken me years to develop those tools. So that's what I try to show someone and ask those questions of how much is this going to cost you if you don't do it, rather than looking at the cost of if you do it. And then if it's the right fit, I'll do a free strategy session with someone. They go to talkwithpatrick.com, and there I'll set up a strategy session with them. They can book right on my calendar. I don't do that for everybody, but for like people from your podcast, because you're my friend, that's something I offer. Talkwithpatrick.com, and when they go there, they set up a strategy session. They get to kind of take it for a test drive. What are we actually going to work on? How am I going to help you? What resources are we going to use? Because most people still, even in 2025, some do, but most won't buy a car without driving it. Most people won't. A lot of people won't try food unless they've sampled it first before they buy the whole thing, right? And I understand that. So if most people, if they're going to make an investment in themselves, they want to take it for a test drive. And if I can't prove myself to you, then you shouldn't hire me. So that's really kind of the way I get around that objection, which was the biggest one for me. So it's the one I focus on the most.
I always just say cost is only an issue in the absence of value.
Yep.
And you mentioned time. I value time because it's the most valuable resource we have, because it's the one we can't get any more of.
100%.
So if anybody doesn't value time, then they're never going to be a fit for a coach ever,
Right.
because time is your single greatest resource. So cost is irrelevant. What do you value? That's what you should be focused on. So Patrick, this has been great. And again, one more time, how do they find your book?
Yep, you can go to patricknyesser.com, or you can find it on Amazon. The book's called If I Can Do It, You Can Do It. Last name is Engasser, because I know people spell it wrong all the time. And then talkwithpatrick.com if you're looking to get some time on my calendar to talk about how I might be able to help you and get to the next level.
All right, well, it was good catching up, man.
It's
Thanks so
always
much
good
for
catching
coming
up.
on in.
It was a pleasure, man. It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And folks, thanks for joining us for this episode of Money School. We will see you on the next one.